All right, let's dive right into this explainer of Pixar's 2021 animated hit, Luca. If you just glance at the poster, it looks like this breezy, beautiful, sun-drenched trip to the Italian Riviera, gelato, sunshine, and a totally carefree summer. But as we're going to explore today, beneath that sparkling surface is a surprisingly profound coming-of-age story. We aren't just looking at a simple adventure about sea monsters here. We are unpacking the deep psychology of in-groups and out-groups, the mechanics of societal prejudice, bravado as a trauma response, and the deeply bitter-sweet reality of outgrowing our childhood friendships.
So what happens when the world you are told to fear is the only place you want to explore? It's a question that perfectly frames the mindset of our young protagonist, Luca Pagoro, but honestly, it's also a deeply universal human experience. Luca is this young sea monster whose innate, buzzing curiosity about life above the waves completely clashes with everything he's ever been taught by his community. We've all been there in some way, haven't we? It is that classic, quintessential conflict between our inherited beliefs, the boundaries set by our parents and society to keep us safe, and our own personal intuition telling us there is just more out there. Luca represents that exact moment in adolescence when the desire to discover the unknown finally overrides the fear of stepping out of bounds.
This brings us to part one, Beyond the Ocean, and a look at Luca's underwater life. To truly understand the gravity of Luca's journey, we have to look closely at his highly restrictive status quo. He lives underwater with well-meaning but incredibly overprotective parents who operate on a simple, terrifying absolute. Humans hunt sea monsters, therefore the surface equals death. But the entire narrative shifts when Luca meets Alberto, another young sea monster who just casually spends his days hanging out on land. Alberto reveals a fascinating biological secret. When sea monsters dry off, they physically transform into human-looking boys. But there is a massive catch. The absolute second they come into contact with water, even a stray drop of rain, their true sea monster form is instantly revealed. This isn't just a clever plot device, it's a brilliant metaphor. It perfectly mirrors the universal pressure to hide our true, authentic selves, to assimilate to a dominant culture. It captures that constant, exhausting anxiety of having your hidden identity suddenly exposed by forces entirely out of your control.
Which leads us to our next chapter, a transformative friendship. Let's look at the catalyst that gives Luca the strength to brave the surface. The dynamic between these two is just intoxicating, especially from Luca's perspective. Alberto is adventurous, fiercely independent, and remarkably confident. If you've ever been a shy, cautious kid, you know exactly how magnetic that kind of reckless confidence can be. Alberto introduces Luca to the human world, and together they dream of escaping their ordinary lives to travel the globe. Their ultimate symbol for this escape? A Vespa scooter. The Vespa acts as the ultimate universal symbol for adolescent freedom, that visceral desire to build a machine with your best friend that can physically drive you away from the strict boundaries of your childhood home. Through Alberto's persistent, fearless influence, Luca finally begins to untether himself from his parents' control and experiences his very first taste of true independence. This shared dream pulls them straight out of their comfort zone and into Chapter 3, the Portorosso Triathlon. To get their dream Vespa, the boys venture into the bustling human town of Portorosso, where they team up with Julia, a fiercely intelligent, open-minded girl who desperately wants to win the town's annual triathlon. The literal hurdles they have to overcome for victory? Swimming, eating pasta, and cycling. The prize money is their ticket to freedom. But the triathlon also introduces us to two incredibly polarizing representations of the human world. On one hand, you have Julia, who represents open-minded curiosity, acceptance, and the sheer joy of learning. On the other hand, you have the reigning champion and town bully, Urkel. He represents everything toxic about societal gatekeeping. He thrives on intimidation, exclusion, and maintaining the status quo by keeping outsiders firmly in their place. But as the physical threat of being discovered by the town looms over their training, we enter Part 4, Hidden Depths and Conflicts. While dodging every accidental splash of water to protect their identities is at constant daily stress, there is a much more painful psychological dynamic playing out. As Luca spends more time with Julia, he's exposed to astronomy, schools, and books. He is genuinely expanding his worldview and growing as a person. But in stark contrast, Alberto is stagnating. He begins to feel intensely hurt, jealous, and abandoned by his best friend's shifting priorities. And this is honestly one of the most profound and painful truths of growing up. The sudden realization that a friendship that once meant everything to you might be fundamentally changing, simply because one of you is outgrowing the dynamic that brought you together in the first place.
Up to this point, Alberto has projected a loud, bulletproof, incredibly adventurous persona. He acts like literally nothing in the world can hurt him. But as he watches Luca connect with Julia, that armor begins to crack. His reaction isn't just annoyance, it's a deep, existential panic. Why is this endlessly confident kid suddenly so profoundly threatened by his best friend reading a book with someone else? What is actually hiding beneath that fearless exterior?
Well, the story reveals a truly heartbreaking reality. Alberto's extreme bravado isn't genuine confidence at all, it is a desperate trauma response. We learn that his father abandoned him, and he has been living entirely alone in a ruined tower for years. This completely shatters Luca's and our understanding of the character. Alberto pushes people away or acts invincible because he's terrified of being rejected and left alone yet again. He projects exactly what he lacks: control and invulnerability. His obsession with the Vespa and just riding away was never about exploring the world. It was about running away from the agonizing loneliness of his reality. He clung to Luca because Luca was the first person in years who made him feel like he actually mattered.
This powerful emotional climax ultimately collides with the physical plot in Part 5, Unmasking Prejudice. During the intense climax of the triathlon, the rain starts to fall, and Luca and Alberto's secret is finally, undeniably exposed to everyone. Initially, the townspeople react exactly how Luca's parents always warned they would. They grab nets and harpoons, reacting with immediate, visceral fear. This is textbook sociology playing out right on screen. The town has an established in-group, and they have always harbored a deep prejudice against the out-group, sea monsters, believing them to be inherently dangerous monsters. It's fear born entirely from a lack of exposure and complete misunderstanding. They're looking at Luca and Alberto. They're looking at generations of inherited bias, telling them that anything unknown is a mortal threat.
But just as the town is about to attack, Julia's father, this massive, intimidating fisherman who has hunted sea monsters his whole life, steps in. He looks past the scales, sees the terrified boys who have been living in his home and eating at his table, and publicly declares that they are harmless. That single, decisive moment of grace causes a massive ripple effect. It highlights an incredible truth about dismantling prejudice. It often only takes one respected person in a community to challenge the status quo, to shatter a deeply held collective fear. It beautifully proves that true acceptance requires actively choosing to look past our inherited fears, to embrace people for who they truly are. As the dust settles in Portorosso, we reach our final chapter: growing up and letting go. You know, the film spectacularly subverts the standard children's movie trope where best friends promise to stay together forever no matter what. Instead, it offers a remarkably mature conclusion. The two friends realize they must follow completely different paths to get what they truly need to heal and grow. Luca gets on a train with Julia to attend school, finally allowed to explore the larger world he always dreamed of. Alberto, however, stays behind with Julia's father. After years of isolation and masking his pain with bravado, Alberto doesn't need to roam the world on a Vespa. He just needs a home, a father figure, and a place where he truly belongs. It's deeply emotional because it acknowledges that two people can love each other profoundly, but still need entirely different environments to thrive. Which leaves us to ponder this final question. Is parting ways a tragic end, or simply the necessary courage required to grow up and find your true self? Luca is so much more than a summer adventure. It's an exploration of how we face our deepest fears, how we dismantle our biases, and the beautiful, painful journey of growing up. It reminds us that true friends don't hold us back to keep themselves comfortable. They encourage us to bravely explore the depths of life. Sometimes the absolute most loving thing a friendship can do is give you the courage to become yourself, even if it means eventually letting go.